Hey, welcome to today's episode of Philosophy for Not Thinkers. I'm Kaler, and I'm here with my co-host Esteban. Hey, how's it going, Esteban?
Hey, Kyler, thanks for introducing myself. I'm doing great, and I'm really excited about today's topic. It is a deep one, and what we're gonna do is to dive into the ideas of Byung-Chul Han, a philosopher who's been critically examining the effects of our modern society, productivity-driven society, actually.
Exactly. So, pretty much today we are exploring two essential concepts in Hans' work: Vitta Activa, the active life, and Vitta Contemplativa, which refers to the contemplate life. These two ways of living offer insight into the pressure we face today and how we can navigate them. So, let's go. First, Esteban, why do you think this topic is so important nowadays?
Well, Kyler, I want to point out that this modern world society has changed dramatically, and over the last few decades, I found that we are in an era of hyper productivity, and nowadays, from work, emails to social media, all of those things demands of our attention. And I think Hans' ideas about Vita Activa and Vita Contemplativa are especially important because they speak to the tension between these two ways of life. The one that encourages constant activity, these facts of doing more and achieving more, and the another one that encourages of slowing down and reflecting ourselves.
Right, and we see this tension everywhere. People are burned out and they're constantly feeling they need to do more and yet not feeling truly fulfilled. Hence, analysis help us explain why we experience so much stress in our modern lives. And his insight is especially valuable now as we try to juggle our work and our lives and our mental health.
Exactly. We're living in what Han describes as the achievement society, and this is a world that encourages self optimization. But I think this emphasis on productivity doesn't leave room for rest and or reflection, uh, which is where the contemplative life becomes so essential, I think.
You're right. So, what about if we just give a little bit more of background about what these two concepts mean? So, pretty much, let's start with Vita Activa, the active life. Hans argues that modern society encouraged to embrace this constant state of action. And as we were mentioning before, we are told to optimize every aspect of our life. It can be our work, our health, our social interactions. But, Stefan, what does that lead to?
It leads to burnout, for one. Han says that in an achievement society, we don't just work for living, we live to work, and our worth is measured by how much we can achieve and how many hours we can grind and how much we can produce. But this constant hustle doesn't give us the space to reflect, to question, or to simply be.
Yeah, and I think about the rise of the entrepreneurship culture or even the hustle culture. It's not just about having a job anymore, it's about building an empire, being your own boss, or even constantly striving to do more. There's really not room for slowing down or stepping back, but at what cost? Has argues that this kind of self imposed pressure leads to anxiety and many times to depression.
Yeah, to me, it seems to be a paradox, right? But I think we have all this freedom to choose our work, our lives, but we also have this constant pressure to be successful, to keep achieving. And for me, I find it exhausting, and I think a lot of people are starting to realize it is not sustainable, and it is almost as if the more we accomplish, the less we feel fulfilled.
This is a great point, Esteban, and I think it's not just about work. Let's see, think about our social lives too. We're constantly connected through social media and always trying to keep up with everyone, and there's this feeling that we need to be active and visible and constantly engaging, even when it's mentally and emotion draining, you know?
Kalir, so I think we both experience burnout in some form or another, but it is almost a rite of passage in our modern world, unfortunately. I know for me, I've had times where I felt I was juggling way too many projects, like staying up late to finish work and then waking up to do it all over again, like it is a circle. And it felt like I was running on empty.
Definitely. I've been there, Steven. You know, last year I was caught up in this endless cycle and I was working like long hours and even pushing myself to stay productive and positive. And I was all the time checking my phone. And then when I was not really working, I was feeling guilty for doing not enough. So at some point, I realized I haven't taken a proper break like in months.
Yeah, and what's gonna happen when you're constantly working without reflection? I feel like you start to lose sight of why you're doing it all. Like the projects stop being meaningful, and it becomes about getting through the day, and not about actually enjoying the work or finding fulfillment in it.
Exactly. And what Hans points out is that this constant striving doesn't just lead to, let's say, physical exhaustion, it also affects our mental and emotional well being and the relationship that we have with ourselves. Because we have become so disconnected from ourselves, mm, because we're so focused on everything that comes next, you know, Esteban?
If you ask me, it is almost like we've turned ourselves into machines that only know how to work, but we don't know how to rest. And that's where Vitta Contemplativa comes in.
Alright, so now let's switch off and let's talk about Vita Contemplativa or the contemplative life. Han described this as a life of reflection of stillness, you know, Esteban? And it's kind of like this seeking meaning beyond the endless pursuit of achievement. And it's the life of the philosopher, the artist, and it's all about slowing down, you know, being present and reflecting on life rather than just moving through it.
Yeah, and here is where we find this branch. And in contrast to the Vita Activa or the active life, uh, the contemplative life is about taking a step back and disconnecting from the constant noise of society and focusing on inner peace. And this is not about doing nothing. It is about creating a space for thought and for reflection and for connecting with something deeper in life.
That doesn't mean we should abandon the active life altogether, you know? Harry isn't saying that we should stop working or striving. He simply point out that we need to create a balance, you know, Esteban? The contemplative life allow us to recharge and reflect and kind of to give us a more meaningful life.
I think we're seeing a resurgence of interest in practices like mindfulness, meditation, and even yoga. And these are modern ways of reconnecting with the contemplative life. But people are starting to realize that to avoid burnout and stress, they need to make time for reflection and for slowing down. And this is not just about mental health, but it's about the meaning of your life, what meaning you're giving yourself, and the things you do on everyday's life.
Exactly. And you know, there's evidence that the contemplative practice like meditation, the one that you were mentioning before, can actually help us with things like stress reduction, emotional like a more mental balance, you know? And these aren't just fluffy activities, they have tangible benefits for our well being.
So, how do we bring this into our everyday life? To me, one thing that has helped uh, is practicing mindful productivity instead of trying to do everything all at once. Like, I try to focus on the task at a time, and I set boundaries for myself, like turning off notifications when I need to concentrate, or just scheduling intentional breaks.
Oh, I love that. Mindful productivity. Another thing that I've started doing is taking short but intentional pauses through the day, you know, Esteban? Even if it's just for a few minutes, I usually step back away from my desk and take a deep breath and just reflect, you know? It's like a mini reset for my brain, and it always helps me to stay kind of calm, you know?
Yeah, and I also think that this is about rethinking the role of social media. And I've started limiting the time I spend on platforms like Instagram or Twitter. And I make sure that when I'm on them, I'm engaging in more meaningful way. Like I'm connecting with friends or following content that it's truly enriching. It is easy to get lost on social media actually. There are a lot of stimuli distracting our brains from what uh, it's really meaningful.
So to give us a biggest perspective, Esteban, we had invited a group of friends of mine. One of him is from Norway, the other one is from the US, and the third one is from Malaysia, which is a Asian country. So we're gonna start with my friend from the US. We had asked him some questions, but I think the main one was, do you ever stop to think about what are you doing in a conscious way, or do you just simply live in the rush of the day-to-day life? Go ahead, Ryan.
So yeah, if I'm traveling, I get a bit stressed, especially to unfamiliar places. But obviously, there's always more you want to do. I've got a writing project I'd like to get a bit faster. I've got paintings I want to paint that I haven't got round to, but I don't feel stressed about it. I mean, sooner or later I'll get all this stuff done, assuming I don't drop dead in the meantime. Um, if you just carry on carrying on and beaver away at things, eventually things get done. The worst thing you can do is get stressed and worry about not getting enough done, because then you don't. You just tire yourself out and everything becomes stressful and horrible. Anyhow, that's how I see it.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Well, I do find interesting what you're saying, and I feel it's very easy to get overwhelmed with things around you, and it's very challenging to get over that cycle. And hey, thank you very much for that information. So right now we're gonna jump into my friend Nicola. Nicola is from Japan. He's been living in Japan for, he say, 15 years now. And I want to ask him the same question. So thank you, Nicola. Go ahead.
I think it depends. I'm usually rushing around doing different things at work, so I kind of live more rushed that way, I guess. I don't get the chance to stop too much and just consider what's going on. But maybe, on a free time, weekends or something, it's a little more relaxed. I tend to stop and consider what I'm doing more often.
Well, so is I found very interesting that, at times where, for example, countries like Japan, those are countries where everybody it's a little bit more busier than usual, and people tend to fall into these standards where you do have to work, you do have to do a lot, and you, as I've mentioned before, you fall in this circle where it's very hard to get out. And I feel by Nicolas' experience, we can tell, as he was mentioning before, he just got the weekends to rest. And yeah, it's a very interesting point of view. Pretty much our last topic for the podcast today is about as research that we found based on the PCA, why Italian people live happier, and how Esteban and I related this with Italians are more connected with the Vita Contemplativa that the authors talk about, and also related with the Japanese culture and why they are more related from our point of view to the Vitta Attiva, which at times just consider working um, as the only way to live your life.
I also think it is important to discuss about the mental health implications of the competition. Uh, in terms of Japanese culture, there is a significant stigma around the mental health, and this pressure to succeed can result in higher levels of depression. And for instance, in Italy, although mental health stigma exists, there is a more understanding and a public discussion around it, especially when it comes to balancing work and life.
And I do agree with you, and I think that it's very important to talk about mental health issues with not just Italians and Japanese people, but with societies all over the world, because I believe you also agree with me about that it's very important to have a healthy society to really take care about our mental health. And that's our invitations for you guys today, for the ones who are listening to our podcast, to to take a moment today to think about um, what do you want for your life, and not just as a deep question, but also as a, kind of like you can just stop for 30 seconds, um, look around, see what's going on. And I believe if you put a little bit more of a meaningful meaning to your life, a little bit more of connection to your actions, I believe our society and your own life will improve a lot. So I want to thank you guys, the ones who are listening to this video. I want to thank Esteban for joining me to this crazy idea, and also to my guests, Ryan and Nicola. They were very also helpful, and I really appreciate the time for all of you. So bye now, and I hope to see you all in a new podcast later on. Thank you.